My goodness, would you look at that? We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special live stream we've got going on. My name is Ramon. I'm part of the team here at BuildShip, and it is my honor to take you through today a session of setting up both BuildShip and Toddle. It's going to be super cool. It's going to be live building. Folks in the chat, feel free to join in with any questions, ideas, comments, anything you might have that we can make this as collaborative an experience as possible. But I'm not going to hold up too much. I just want to say what a joy it is to be here with two incredible people. I'm going to let them join in one by one. First, I'm going to bring in Andreas, who is the co-founder of Toddle. Let me bring you in real quick. And here we are. Hello, Andreas. How are you?
Hello, I'm really good. I'm super excited to be here. Yes, as Ramon said, co-founder. Oh, I'm sorry. As you said, co-founder of Toddle. We do a little bit. I'll go. Yeah, I'm a co-founder of Toddle. We're very excited. Toddle and BuildShip are two tools that work really well together. And we're looking forward to show you some of what you can do with it. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Andreas. I'm going to be much more cognizant of that as we move forward. But it's not just me and Andreas. I've got a third person to bring in here from the BuildShip team, and it is my joy to introduce Luis, bringing you in. Hey, Luis, how are you?
And yeah, excited to get started.
Sorry, Luis, we couldn't hear you there for a minute. Could you start over, please?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you great now.
I think there's connection problems. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you great now. So I'd love it if you could please introduce yourself, Luis.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a software engineer here at BuildShip, and I'm super excited for what we're going to be building and showcasing to you guys today. And I can't wait to get started, really.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. Today, as you might have heard already, we're going to show you how just in 1 hour you can build a complete app end-to-end with no code. And to do this, we're going to be using both Toddle for front-end and BuildShip for the back-end. The idea that we're going to be exploring today is called the Project Showcase app. And with this app, you're going to be anyone will be able to submit their website or their showcase page URL, and users can also explore and see all of the submitted projects, which, yeah, with no code. And at the end of the session, we're going to have a fully working app. So we're going to divide this into a couple of parts. First, we're going to be doing the BuildShip part with Luis, and then Andreas is going to show us how to do the Toddle part. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait. And hey, the best part is you don't need to deal with me anymore. I'm going to be hiding in the shadows. Folks, please, any questions that you send in, please. Oh, actually, we have some people saying hello. Oh, I'm going to take a moment to say hello to Steven. The Toddle Discord sent you here. Hello. We've got Bavia saying hello. Shams is saying hello. Good to see you all. Jeffrey is saying hello. I'd love to hear where folks are tuning in from. But as we work through this, Dreams API says howdy. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm not going to hog the stage anymore. I'm going to let Luis take over. I'm going to bring in your screen share. Luis, whenever you're ready, you are good to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Ramon. Okay, I hope you guys can see my screen. So as Ramon alluded to in the beginning, I'll be focusing on building out the backend side of the project today. And we're going to be using BuildShip for this. So if you guys are unfamiliar with BuildShip, it's a relatively new low-code tool that allows you to build just about any backend visually while harnessing the power of AI. So you can build stuff like public APIs, private APIs, you can build schedule jobs. We have tons of AI models integrations that you can utilize. But the cool thing is that if there's something that you want to build, but we don't have support for it, then you can actually use AI to generate it. But with that said, I just want to quickly share with you guys the requirements for the two workflows that we'll be building today. So At the end of this, we're going to be having two workflows. We're going to have one that's going to be responsible for saving the project and one for retrieving the project. So from our Toddle UI, when we get a request, we will be getting in the payload, the title, description, URL. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to generate a QR code of the URL. We're going to want to generate a screenshot of the URL. And then we're going to want to save all this data in our BuildShip database. And at the end of this workflow, we just want to return the ID of the newly created project. And then our project workflow, as I said, will just return the projects. In this case, we just want to return the 10 latest projects. And that's about it. So with the requirements out of the way, I'll head over to BuildShip now, and I'll start working on our first workflow here. So in BuildShip, what I'll do is I'll create a new workflow. And the first thing we're going to need to do here is select the trigger. So for this one, we will be using the REST API call. So our workflow is going to be publicly accessible, and our trigger will kick off the execution of our workflow. So as I mentioned, we expect a post request. So for the method here, we'll set this to post. And for the path, let's just set it to save project. Great. Now, the next thing that we want to do here is we want to add a node that will help us generate a QR code. But luckily, we already have a node that we can search from. So after the trigger, I'll select this plus icon to add a new node, and I'll search for QR code. As you can see, we have a nice utility node that will help us generate a QR code. Now, if we go back to our original diagram here, you can see in the request payload, we are getting a URL field. So we're going to take this URL field, feed it to our node, and we're going to get back a QR code generated. So let's see how we're going to do that. So here where it says URL, we're going to go grab the request body. But the field that we are concerned about here is called URL. Okay, the next thing we want to set here is the scale. So this will just control like the overall size of the QR code we generate. So I'll set it to 8 for now. Okay, well, this is good, but
hey, Luis, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're just getting some requests in the chat. If you could please bump up the screen size, the font size in the video. It's a little blurry for some folks.
Okay, let me see.
Thank you so much, Streams API, for requesting that.
Is this good?
Maybe bump it up once more, please.
Okay. Let me know if that's okay. I can do it more if you want.
Thank you, thank you. I think that should be good for now. I'll disappear. Whee! Sorry, did I do something? Oh, there you are, Luis.
He's back.
Sorry, I think we lost you for a second. Sorry, Luis, we lost you for a second, but you should be back.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that we now have a node here that we can use to generate our QR code. But now what we want to do is we want to upload this to Google Cloud Storage. But when we upload the file, we want to give it a unique name because we don't want to overwrite it. So to do that, we're going to use another utility node from BuildShip called UUID generator. And this node will just allow us to generate unique string IDs. So I'll add this node. Okay, so this will give us a unique string back, and we're going to use that unique ID for the name of our QR code that we're going to upload to cloud storage. The interesting thing here about this generate with QR code is that if we open up the code panel and go to the output section, this actually returns a base64 version of the generated QR code. So we're going to add a node here from the BuildShip storage category. that will help us upload base64 files. So I'm going to add this node, and this node expects 2 inputs here. So the first one will be the location of the base64 file. So we're going to get this value from the generate QR code. So let's do that. We'll come here. We're going to go to variables, and we're going to select the generate QR code node. Okay. Now for the file name, if you guys remember, I said that we want to provide unique names for the files here. That's why we added the UUID generated node above. So let's do that. So here we're going to add this as an expression value, but we want to store our QR codes in a subdirectory. So we'll say here QR codes will be the name of the directory that we're going to store this. And then for the file name here, we're going to do some string interpolation to dynamically inject the value we get back from the UUID generator node. So let's add that. Whoops. It needs to be in the curly braces. Okay. And then I'll just add that PNG at the end. So what we expect here is that this node will upload our QR code to our cloud storage on the QR codes / a unique name for the QR code that we generate. Okay, great. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to take a screenshot of the URL as well. And just as before, we have another utility node that we can use to do this. So if we just search for a screen, we're going to see a utility node screenshot URL. So we can add this here. And again, it expects the URL that we're going to get from the request body. So I'll just do that. Request body. And then the field that we want is, of course, the URL field. Great. And now file path here is going to be the destination in cloud storage where we want to store the screenshots. So we're going to want to do something similar to what we use for file name over here, where we're storing it with a unique name. So we can just come here and copy this code. And for the file path, we're just going to paste it. But we don't want to save it under the QR codes directory. We want to save it on the screenshots. And we're going to leave the unique identifier for the name, and the extension can remain as PNG. And there's one more thing that we want to do here, because we want to take a screenshot of the entire web page. So from the header to the footer and the entire width, we need to pass an option here to specify that we want to take a screenshot of the, the full page. So to do that, we'll say full page, and we'll set this to true. Great. So that will take care of taking a screenshot of the URL for us. And now what we want to do is we're going to want to upload this to our cloud storage. So we're going to come here. We're going to go to the BuildShip file storage, and we'll select upload file. And as I add this node, I can immediately see that this is using an outdated version of this node, because all we really need here is the destination and local file path. So let's see how we can remove the other 2 inputs that we don't need. To do that, we're going to bring up the code panel. We're going to go to inputs. And here we only want to keep destination and local file path. So we will remove external URL, and we will remove output name. So we just hit save, and we're good. And so the destination here, I actually made a mistake. Sorry about that. File path here is the local file path where the screenshot will be saved. So I want to just edit this a bit, and I just want it to be without the screenshots. So it will just contain the file name. So this is where we're going to save it locally. At this point, upload file, destination is where I meant to paste that value, where we have the screenshots directory. Okay, and for the file that we want to upload, well, we want to upload our screenshot URL. So let's get that, we're going to go to variables and we're going to select our screenshot URL. Great. So at this point, we are uploading our QR code and we're also uploading the screenshot of the URL. So we're now at a point where we can take all of this data and store it in our BuildShip database. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we'll add a new node here and we'll go to the BuildShip database group and we want to select the create document node. So here we need to specify where we want to store this data. So we want to store it in a projects collection. Document ID we can omit. And the important bit here is the data that we want to save. So we're going to pass this as an object. And here we're going to specify all the fields that we want to save. So we know we want to save the URL, we want to save the description, the title, and we want to save the URLs of the QR code and screenshot. So let's do that. The first thing I'll add here is the title, and the title, we're going to get it from the request body. So we'll go request body and do that title because that's what we want. The next thing here is the description. So we do the same thing. So I can literally just copy this and do body that description. And now we want to save the URL. I'll just paste that again and do body that URL. Okay, so we're almost there. Whoops. The only two things that I want to add here now is the QR code URL, which we'll get from the upload base64 file node. So if you guys remember, this is the node that we're using to upload the QR code to our cloud storage. And at the end, this node will output a publicly accessible URL that we can use to fetch the QR code. So let's add it. And let me just make this a little bigger. Okay. And then the last thing we want to add here is the screenshot URL. So let's do that. And we will get the value here from the upload file download URL. And that looks good. So I think this is all the data we need to save in our database. So we are almost completed with this node. So the last thing we need to do here is, of course, return some value. So we want to add a return node. So we'll add this node. So status code will set to OK, indicating a successful execution of this workflow. And then the value we want to return here, let's just say we want to return the ID of the newly created document. So we'll get this from our create document node. So we'll come here, variables, create document, and we want to use the ID. Okay, so we've completed this workflow. I'm now ready to deploy this, and then we're going to test if everything works. So we're going to deploy, and let's just give this a few seconds. Great. So the deployment is successful. And at the end, we can now copy the publicly accessible endpoint URL. And of course, this is the URL that we will be passing on to Andres. But for now, we want to test it to make sure that everything is working as expected. So I'll just head over to my REST API client, and I'll be making a new post request. So here I'll replace this URL with the one I just copied. And you can see that I've already supplied some data here that we want to send. So we're going to send the URL, the description, and the title. So I'll submit this request. And if everything works successfully, we should get back the unique project ID. It works. Great. So we've successfully created the first workflow here, which is responsible for saving the project. Okay, we just have one more workflow to create, and this workflow is going to be responsible for retrieving these projects that we saved. So let's do that now. We're gonna head back into BuildShip, and we'll create a brand new workflow. Here, we'll add the same trigger that we added before, REST API call. And for this time, going back to our diagram here, you can see that we're going to leave it as a GET request, and we're going to set the path to projects. So let me just set it to projects. Great. Now we want to fetch the 10 latest projects from our database. So we're going to do that by adding an existing node, again from our BuildShip database group. We have this collection query node that we can use. And if you remember, we saved the project under the collection projects. So let's use that. And for now, we're just going to say that we only want to return 10 projects. But what we want to do is return the 10 latest projects. So I am just noticing that I forgot to add a specific field there when we're creating the project, which is the created at timestamp. So please forgive me. I need to go back and do one more change when we're creating the document. So here in the data, I forgot to add the created at date. So this is the field that we'll be using to order projects in descending order. So for now, what we can do is just set it to the current date. In JavaScript, we can just do new date to do that. Okay. So as I just made a change, I'll need to redeploy my workflow. Okay. Well, let's do this one more time. So we're going to change the URL here, and let's use the toddle.dev landing page. So we're going to come here to our client again. We're going to replace the URL. We can leave everything else the same, and let's resubmit. And this should still work. And it does. So we did get back our project ID. So I'll go back to the workflow I was just working on, which is the collection query here. And now I can fill out the order by. So you can see this is giving us some hint here on the pattern to use here. So it expects an array. And here you can see that the field name is set to either ASC for ascending or descending, right? Field name here, we're going to use created at. So we're going to go here to our editor, and we're going to open up a new array with these square brackets, and we're going to put a object here. So the field name that we want to sort by, if you remember, is the created at field, which I just added. So we'll say created at, and then the value here can be either descending or ascending. But we want to use descending because we want to get the latest projects. So we're just going to do DES, short for descending. Great. Now, all we need to add here is the return node that will return the results from this query. So let's do that. We'll add a return node. Let's add it. Of course, we're going to set the status code to OK. And the value we're going to get from our collection query node. So let's do that. We're going to go variables, collection query, and we're done. Let's now ship and deploy a new workflow. And let's just give this a couple of seconds, and then we're going to test that this works as well. So let's copy the endpoint URL. We'll switch over and we'll replace this URL. We're going to make sure that the request method here is get. And what we should get back here is our project. So if you guys can see, we're getting back our created project, and you can see that here we get back an array of projects. It has the project ID. We have a nested object here called data that contains the additional data, such as the screenshot URL and QR code. Well, how about we check and see if it actually took the screenshot correctly. So let's take this URL and I'll open up here. And you guys may be wondering, well, why is this thing so narrow? Well, as I told you, this is taking a screenshot of the entire web page, in this case, Toddle.dev's landing page. And it's doing that from top to bottom, so from the header to the footer, from left to right. But if we zoom in here, we can see that this is in fact a screenshot of the Toddle dev landing page. And now let's take a look at our QR code. And this is a QR code. Well, what I'll do is I'll just take my phone here. I don't think you guys will be able to see this, but when I scan it, it does bring me back to the Toddle dev website. So it looks like both our workflows are working. And if we go back to our requirements here, we fulfilled them. So we now have a workflow that is responsible for capturing the form submission that we'll be getting from our Toddle dev frontend and saving the project. And we have a separate workflow that will be responsible for returning the projects to our Toddle frontend. So I am now in a position where I can pass on these workflow endpoints to Andres and pass the time over to him, where he's going to be creating a gorgeous UI for us. So I'll be doing that now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Luis. I'm going to hide your screen and bring in Andreas. Andreas, are you ready for us?
I am ready. If you have some endpoints for me, I am ready to set it up.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and share your screen then. If I could ask you, Andreas, just like with Luis, if you could please, when navigating to new pages, zoom in your browser so that those of us watching on mobile or with lower connection speeds can engage. Luis, I'll leave you in here just so you two can collaborate, and I will be back in the background. Friends, if you have any questions, keep them coming. I love that the questions are coming in. Keep them coming, and I'll see you all in a bit. Take it away, Andreas.
Right. Thank you very much. I hope you can get a decent idea of what's happening on my screen. It's going to be a little bit hard to zoom in much more than this, but let me know if you have any issues. So yeah, and thank you, Luis, for building a nice API that we can use in our application here. So unlike Luis, I've cheated a little bit and I've built some of the UI from scratch, because crafting UI, and especially if you want it to look nice, often takes a little bit longer. So, but all I've done here is I've created a nice looking page with a header. I've got a title here called, we've decided to call it Cool Tools on the front end. And all I have here is actually just some dummy data. So I've just added an image here and put a screenshot of our website in. I've just typed in the title Toddle here. There's no fetching data going on or anything like that. So it's just mocked up the UI in Toddle. And now I'd like to show how we can go and fetch data from BuildShip and actually make this a dynamic application where it's rendering the data we're getting back from the backend. So do you have an endpoint for me, Luis?
Yes. Yeah, I pasted in the chat, the stream chat.
Ooh, okay, it's right here. Projects, yes. So I'm just going to go and copy that first endpoint projects. And so inside Toddle, what I can do is I can create a new API, and I'm going to call that projects. And I'm just going to paste the URL from Luis in here. And Toddle automatically passes it into the different parts. So it's easy to understand which part is the base URL, what's the path. And you can kind of, whatever that API requires of headers and query params or whatever you might set up, you can sort of configure that here. And you can see as we right as we paste it in, we're going to fetch the data and get it back. So in Toddle, by default, when you're fetching data, it's automatically fetching it. So you don't have to go and trigger an action to do that. Most of the time, what you really want is when you load the application, you want the data to be available, right? And we can see the data he created here. We've got in here, we've got like a list of 2 projects. We've got the first one with the screenshot URL, created at. We've got our description, title, URL, etc. So it's already fetched all the data we need. So what I can now do is, because I have a list of projects fetched from the API, I want to take this article element here, and I want to repeat that for every item in the array we're getting back. So if you noticed inside our project, we're getting back here this list or this array of projects, and I want one of these cards for every project. So in Toddle, that's called repeating. So we can right-click on this article element and say repeat. And this opens up our formula.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Once again, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're getting some requests in the chat. If you could maybe zoom in just a little touch more. I'm afraid, unfortunately, it's a little bit difficult to like balance it so that we can see your pictures as well as the dashboard itself. So, for example, if the way I have you now, it's cutting off the bottom side of the screen. So I think the only option we're going to have here is to have it side by side. So we're going to try our best to be zoomed in, friends, but please bear with us.
Right.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Excellent. We're at 170%. So it's not 100. Things might start popping outside the screen a bit, but hopefully it'll be fine. We'll see what we can do. But so in here, we're inside our formula editor. So in Toddle is very much a no-code tool, as in you can pretty much do anything without writing any code. There are also options for extending functionality with code, but you really rarely need it. So the formulas here lets us essentially figure out and transform the data from right now. We have some APIs and some different bits of data, and we want to get out that array from our projects, right? So I can select projects, and then I can sort of drill into that data here. So I'm going to pick the data, and right here I can see I've got my array as an output here, my array of projects. And when repeating, that's what I want. I want to choose the array that I want to repeat over here. So now we've got 2 elements. Let's just go down here. We'll make it a little bit smaller. I hope that works. So now we've got 2 cards here on our screen. They're still, say, looking like 2 Toddle projects, because right now all we've done is say repeat. Our next step is then go and bind all this data we have inside these cards to match what we got from the API, right? So we'll start with the image. Toddle is very much based on HTML and the web standard. So if you're a little bit familiar with HTML, all this will feel very familiar. If you're not so familiar with it, it's easy to learn. There's a ton of resources outside of even our own documentation. There's also an enormous amount of resources on how HTML actually works. You don't need to learn all the syntax, but the basic ideas are the same, right? So for images, what we have is a tag called img for image, and then it has this attribute source. And right now we just posted a value in it, but just like we did with repeat, we can use a formula here by clicking this little FX button. And now that we repeated over the article, because this image is inside, we have access to some new data inside our formula. I'm just going to go on because we don't have so much space. Now I have this repeat item. And the repeat item represents the current item I'm repeating over. And what I want here for the image is inside data and then screenshot URL. right? I can say okay, and now we can see we're getting a different image for each card, because now it's actually fetching that image that matches the card we're building. We can do the same thing here for the title. If we select the text inside, we choose the repeat item, then data, and then title. And then last, I'm going to take this little link here, and I'm going to go and change the, first of all, I'm going to go and change the text inside it to be item, data, and URL. And then since I need this again for the actual href attribute on a link, so in HTML, that's what tells you where you're going to when you click the link. I can just copy this and then use the exact same formula here for my href. Right? So href, if you're not familiar with HTML, is called a hypertext reference. You don't need to remember that. People just call it href. But it's basically when you have a link tells you what is the website I'm linking to, right? So now we've added all that. We actually also got one more thing. We got a QR code, which I don't have here, right? So I'm going to go and add a new element. It's going to be an image, which starts with this nice, lovely big image. Let's start by styling that a bit and say maybe 40. That's maybe a bit too 60 by 60. That sounds pretty decent. It's maybe a bit small for QR, but we'll see if it works, right? And then we'll go and change its attribute, source attribute, just like we did with the other image. We can change that to item, data, and then what do we have? QR code URL, right? And we get our little QR code up here. So now we can, if we want to play around with this, we can go into test mode where we can scroll around in this page and see all the different data we have, right? We can also go and preview our application in a new tab here, which is going to load up the full tool in a new tab, right? So that was kind of the first part. And here, of course, these links work. So if I click, I'm going to go on to toddle.dev. Now let's do the last bit where we're going to set up the actual form submit. So I'm going to jump into my submit page, and again, I've cheated a little bit. I'm going to need to add a new API here. So we'll go and copy the save project. But in this case, we'll put that in here. Save project. In this case, this is going to be a post request rather than a get request, so I can change that here. Now, I can also go and say that my body inside this should be an object. It should have a title, what did we agree on? Description and URL, right? But I'm not going to fill in those values yet because I haven't quite gotten there yet. So right now, we'll just leave it here. So now I have these three inputs in my form, and I want to be able to capture the information that. So when I change it in Toddle, I want that information to be persisted so I can use it somewhere in my API call. So I'm going to use variables for that. I'm going to create a variable called title, and I'm going to set the initial value to just be an empty string. Then we'll add another one called description. I can't spell description. And we'll add a third one called URL. So a variable is just a way to temporarily store data inside a Toddle application. For example, the value inside a form so we can use it in API. And now what I can do is I can select this input element here with title, and then I can say I want to bind that to a variable title. And what that means is when I'm going into test mode here, and when I change this, I say, what's a good... Rowie, right? When I go and change that here, I'm actually also updating the value inside my variable at the same time. So those two are now linked. Whatever is inside my input field is also the value in my variable. So I'm going to do the same thing for description and once again for URL. And so now that I have all these three, I can actually go into my project here and say, now I can fill out my, where did my body go? Here. Now I can fill that out. This is going to be my title. Let's just go big. This is going to be my description, and here's going to be my URL, right? So that should now all match what our BuildShip backend expects. What is a good description for Rowie? What should we go with? Do you have a tagline?
Awesome low-code tool.
Awesome low-code tool. And I believe it's Rowie dot, what do we have? IO. That's the one. Right. So before we submit, I want to add a little bit more logic here, because I've got these two like messages down here that are just showing now submitting, please wait, and success. And that's because I haven't told them not to be there. But the idea is, of course, that if we start with the first one here, I want to only show this message while this request is loading. And so just like I did with repeat, I can go and say show hide. And this formula in here, then if that returns to a value that's not either false or empty, it's going to show that element. Otherwise, it's going to hide it. So in this case, I can go and pick my save projects and say is loading. So if that's loading, show that paragraph. And when I deselect it, you can see it disappears. And success here, I can do the same and say show hide. And we'll say save project. In this case, when it's done, that's when there's any data left. So right now it's null, means there's no data. But when that data comes, then that property is going to fill out and we'll be able to see it. And so the last thing, of course, is then actually to pick this form and say, well, I only want to show that if either save project data or and let's say project is loading, so that if both of them is not true. So if it's not loading and if it's not actually done, right, then I want to show the form, right? So the last thing I need to do is I mentioned the other API that this was auto fetch. We see we're kind of getting to the limit of what our UI can handle in terms of zoom. But I think if you can read it, then that's fine. So this doesn't have auto fetch on because this is like a post request that often creates stuff. You don't want to automatically trigger that. You want to be very deliberate about when you're submitting that, right? So we have to tell Toddle to submit this. So I'm going to go into this form. I'm going to add a new event, which is saying when this thing happens, then you should do something. In this case, I'm going to pick a form event called submit. And immediately we have this sort of workflow editor. And if it looks a little bit like BuildShip, it's because it works a little bit like BuildShip as well, right? So the first one is just in HTML. Whenever you submit a form, you have to stop it from actually reloading the whole page because that's its default behavior. So we always have that for submit. In this case, I want to call save projects. Now, when it does that, when it's done doing that, I want to add a little bit. Well, actually, let's just run that, and then we'll take it from here. So I'm gonna go and press test, and then we'll hit submit, and we can see that I had an error in my first form, but the other one seems to be working, right? Because we did get these other two. Let me just see why this one wasn't. Why I got the logic wrong. Or because it should be or if either of them. There we go, right? So now we've got thank you for submitting such an awesome tool. And if we go back to our old page, homepage, we now see Rowie coming up here as well. Though, did I get the URL wrong? Oh, it needs fair enough. It needs an HTTPS in front of. Right. So I want to show one more short thing. I'll be brief because we can add a little bit more sass to this. So once we're done submitting, we're done with that. We could also go and actually trigger a workflow when that's done, right? So when we're done with that request, when it comes back and we're done creating this new entry, I want to do confetti because confetti. And then I can actually set, I want to sleep for 2 seconds or 200 milliseconds. So it's going to do the confetti, then it's going to wait for 2 seconds so everyone can enjoy. And then we're going to go to URL and we're just going to do /, which is going to be the home page. So now we stacked all these workflow after each other. We're first going to say, right, I'm going to save the project, going to show that confetti. Then I'm going to wait for 2 seconds while everybody marvels at the confetti. And then we're going to go back to the home page, right? So let's go and preview this. We're going to open up the full one. So what tool are we going to use here? We only build one no-code tool, so we don't have any more. I think we've gotten through all the ones you've built as well. But I mean, make is pretty good, isn't it? No-code automation. And we're going to HTTPS this time. Make.com. It's going to say submitting, please wait. And there we are. Great. I think that's all for me. I think we're also running up on time. So if there's, I don't know if you want to take over, Ramon, if there's any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Can I ask the chat a favor and shower both Andreas and Luis with emojis, hearts, claps, all of that good stuff? Because look at that. In less than an hour, we have a fully fledged app. I mean, that's just amazing. I want to highlight something Stephen Smith said, which is, I'm learning so much, but I need to go at like 0.0000025x speed. That to me is a compliment. So well done, the two of you. Thank you so much for showcasing this. I think we have a little bit of time for Luis, you wanted to expand on this a little bit. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have two workflows.
Let me show your screen. As always, I'll ask that you please zoom in, and then we'll do, like, I think we got some minutes for Q&A after this. So all yours.
Yeah, so hopefully back here in BuildShip, well, our workflows are working great, the two of them, but as we know, there's always room for improvement, right? The first thing that comes to my mind when looking at how to improve our safe project workflow here is adding some additional validation. So right now, our client can just send an empty request, right, without any of this, and our nodes in the workflow will still be executed. Of course, our workflow will break because those fields are missing. But what we can do is add an additional layer of validation here to prevent that from happening. So like I mentioned too, when I was starting out, we have tons of nodes available here that you can use. And we have a bunch of utility nodes for most scenarios. We even have one for object validation. So this would be a way for you to add validation to this workflow to make sure that the fields that you want in the requests are present, right? And you can add additional branching here, right? So let's say, for example, we can come here, we can add a branch. I'll just quickly do this to show you guys. We can say for the condition here, let's use the object validation success. So this will indicate whether the validation is successful or not. And with our branch, if it's successful, we can continue regular execution. And if it's not successful, then we can like hard return something here, like say, instead of status code okay, let's return like bad requests or something like that, right? And then another thing that we can actually do here is if you guys, there's tons of database providers out there, right? And we're just using to create the document right now, the default BuildShip database that comes with every BuildShip project. But if you guys don't want to use this, then we also have integrations that I think you'll find very interesting. We have a Supabase integration that you can use to store your data in Supabase. We even have Postgres. So if you have a Postgres server somewhere, then you can use our Postgres nodes to store your data there. Lastly, we also have, if you want to store your data in your own Firestore database outside of the BuildShip project, then you can do that. So here under Firebase, we have actually not Firebase, Firestore. You can see that we have kind of like the same node here, create Firestore document. The difference here is that you can specify your project ID. Now there's a little bit more setup that you'll need to do for this one, because you'll need to do some configurations, which we provide documentation on our website on how to do this. The reason we went with the create document one is because it's the easiest one to get started with. You don't have to do any additional setup. You can just go straight into saving your data. But I don't want to take up too much time. I think for now, that's all I wanted to share in terms of improvement or modifications that we can do to this workflow. So
amazing. Oh,
yeah, I'm good.
Sorry to interrupt. Well, amazing. Thank you so much, Luis. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, so I'm going to be bringing up a couple questions. We have question 1 from Dreams API, which is for the two of you. And the question is, after we build our projects or tools, how can we generate open API specs, or is that not possible?
Yeah, I can go first if that's okay. In BuildShip, right? So still, I hope you can see you still see my screen
here.
I
shared it.
We can go to the settings of your project here, and we have this API section. And here, you're going to see the API spec for all the different workflows in this project. So for example, like the ones we just created here were like the handle form submission and get documents, right? So if you wanted, you could export the spec. You just select it and export YAML here, and that will download it. So that's going to download, and then I can just show you guys a quick preview of that here in VS Code. And this is downloaded. This is like essentially exported the specification for that particular workflow endpoint. So I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Got question 2 now, and I think this is for the two of you as well. Question 2 for Toddle and BuildShip. Is it possible to do OAuth 2? And if so, do you have videos, demos, or can you do them in the future?
Okay. So currently, we don't have any templates that showcase how to do essentially what he'd probably like to do is build a private API instead of a publicly open API endpoint. So what we'll be doing in the future is we'll be adding a template that showcases how you can verify the authenticity of requests. So to just show you guys, we have here under our Firebase node, we have this verify authorization token to verify requests. Probably not similar to what he's asking for the question, but this is something that would essentially help like prevent unauthorized requests to API endpoints here in BuildShip.
Amazing. Andreas, does this question apply to Toddle as well?
Yeah, I think it does, at least indirectly. But so because Toddle is for building the front end, your users are not going to authenticate with us in any way because the authentication lives with the data and therefore lives on the back end. But what we've done instead is create a system where we make it very easy for you to store your credentials or store your token and then have that being passed on in a secure way. So Toddle works with pretty much any authentication system, just like it works with any backend.
Amazing. Thank you. I think we got time for one more question, which comes from Jeffrey. Any database integrations with AWS products?
That's a great question. Currently, we don't have any integration. Yeah, we don't have any integrations with AWS. So that's something, yeah, we'll definitely bring up with the team and see if we can start adding nodes for integrating with AWS. As you know, there's tons of AWS database providers. So this is something that some people would probably find very useful. So we'll bring that up with the team.
Thank you. How about you, Andreas? Does this question apply to Toddle as well, or is it like a similar thing?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any sort of specifically build integration, but everything on AWS runs through a REST API, so you can connect to any sort of AWS-based backend, just like you can use any Google Cloud-based and Rowi as well. So if you want to use Toddle in a more sort of enterprisey setting, where you already have a big engineering team running your servers on AWS, Toddle works really well as well.
And if I can just inject there a bit, Ramon, before we move on. Of course, I said we don't have direct integrations with AWS or anything or any AWS service yet, but keep in mind that everything here is fully customizable as per your requirements. So this is probably where Generate with AI feature comes in to help you get started by adding, for example, a node. Let's say you want to connect a node to, let's say, a Redshift database from AWS. As you know, AWS provides a SDK that we can use. So just keep in mind that while we may not have these integrations readily available, you still have the ability to kickstart like these custom requirements by using a pretty nifty Generate with AI feature. And that's all I wanted to say.
Sorry, I was muted. Amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for joining. We're gonna conclude that for today. I just want to thank you both so much. I learned so much, and it just always blows my mind when we can get something up and running with just a few clicks. So I hope everyone watching enjoyed this. You can take what you learned in this session as a starting point and edit it any way you like to further expand and build your ideas. But hey, couple favors to ask from y'all. If you enjoyed this session, please show us your love. Send out a tweet. I'll tell you what, I'll ask you to please tag both BuildShip and Toddle. Look at me putting out Twitter links. So there's at BuildShip app and at Toddle Dev. Please tag us there. Tell us what, and we'll send you a DM with a special discount for paid plans. If you want to join the communities, you can also get in touch in Discord. Let me get some links for that and put them into the chat as well. That's buildship.com/discord and discord.com/invite/SVBKYZF3UR. Better to take them from the chat directly than take my word for it. But hey, listen, Andreas, Luis, it's been an utter joy. Thank you both so much. Everyone in the chat, stay real, stay happy, stay safe, and we'll see you all next time. Bye for now.